Yeah, absolutely. So to begin with, the YWCA, our mission is to eliminate racism and empower women and youth. And we do that many ways, but within our department, which is the Racial Justice and Public Policy Department, we look at three main pieces around that elimination of racism. We look at the systemic, the institutional, and the individual. So on the individual basis, we do workshops and newsletters and blogs and facilitator programs, anything for that individual on their own racial justice journey. At the systemic level, we do public policy, so we do advocacy, lobbying, and community organizing around early childhood education and youth development, but really with that focus on equity and how institutionalized racism affects all of us, but most definitely children under the age of 18, and how we talk about that at the systemic level. The institutional area of our work is the bulk of the work that I'm privileged to work on, and that's working with organizations across all sectors, for-profit, nonprofit, government, educational, faith communities that understand that equity is important, or maybe they're at the beginning stages of seeing equity important for their community, for their business. And so for some organizations, we're at the beginning of what is diversity and inclusion and what does that mean, all the way to we've been an anti-racism organization for 25 years and we just want to take it to that next level. And so really supporting those organizations as they're moving along that continuum of really understanding equity and what it means for them as an organization. Two different ways I often explain it. One of the first and quick ways to think about it is we all have very different needs. We're all very different people. We're all very complex and deep, and that's from the way we look on the outside to who we are on the inside and our history and everything that comes with it. And so one quick way to think about it is if you have two babies, one baby is a little bit skinny, needs some, it's not roly-poly, just underweight, and the other baby is a little bit overweight. That when we talk about being equal, will equal be feed both of those children 3 times a day, 3 bottles, and hope for that they'll be healthy children. But we know that those 2 babies don't need the same thing. And so equality is giving both of those babies exactly what they need to return to their parents a healthy child. And so that's a conversation, that's a very quick one, but often what I hear is about how scary that can be. Well, that means one baby will have more than the other, or that baby might take away from another baby. And so when we really break down equity even further and really think about it, I often like to describe it, and give me a few minutes to go through this. So I always like to compare it to something like, I think most folks have been to a sporting event or a concert. And what typically happens at a sporting event or a concert during intermission or halftime?
Yeah, people go to the bathroom.
We flood to the bathroom,
Yeah.
absolutely. So if we think about our old Metrodome that is being rebuilt, equality was you had one woman's bathroom, one men's bathroom on each level. But what we know about bathrooms is usually when we see them, there's a very long line for women, and men are coming in and out, in and out. And so when we take a minute to think about that, why is that? Well, what we know is women use the bathroom a little bit differently than men, just part of the nature of it. And so when we think about that, when we start to talk about equity and really thinking about it in a deeper way, well, we know that women use bathroom differently than men. So instead of that fair is equal and for every 5 bathrooms for men, there's 5 for women, maybe we need to look at, well, no, how does that really work out? Maybe 5 bathrooms for men and 10 for women. So we're rotating everybody through, because if you stop to think about it, if a woman is waiting in line or a young lady is waiting in line to use the bathroom and they're with a gentleman, what are they doing? They're maybe grabbing another beer or another hot dog, or they're waiting. So even that fare it affects the women, but it's also affecting the gentleman waiting as well, because the gentleman is waiting for their partner or for their daughters. And so when we start to look at this in an equity way, everybody is able to utilize the bathroom the way they utilize the bathroom. There's enough bathrooms, but there's no waiting. Women are not waiting in long lines, and men are not typically waiting for their partners or their daughters as well. So it's not taken away, it's actually giving you more time to be together as a couple or as a family as you're waiting for it, which I know often when we talk about equity in that way, we're talking about bathrooms and gender, and it may seem silly, but really we're talking about making sure that everybody has access to what they need, because if I didn't have fast access to, let's say, the restroom, my partner is waiting off on the side for me, and we could have spent more time together, we could have done other things at that time. But so when we talk about that, it does affect us all. It's not taken away, or the fear of taken away. It's really allowing people to have what they need to get through the day, to get through society, to get through their life, that at the end, that this is what I need to be successful, and it's going to look very different than what you need to be successful. But it's not about equaling the playing field, it's about making sure folks have what they need in order to produce great innovative skills within an organization, or get what they need to graduate high school, or receive what they need to utilize the bathroom. And I think that's a very immediate snapshot of right now, your life right now. I think what we have to talk about with equity as well is the historical, that backstory. And so something like housing. How did you get your house? Was wealth passed down from generation to generation to get that house? Well, there are many communities that it was absolutely not allowed to sell a home to people of color. And so while you might have been able to have that wealth from your grandparents passed down to the parents and then passed down to you, which allowed you to maybe go to live in a good neighborhood, go to a school that had money because of the neighborhood that it was in, go on to college. Those, where you're at in your life, just didn't happen magically. There is a history there. There was pieces to get you there, and none of us does it by ourselves. I mean, let's be real. We can't live in this world and be truly 100% independent. And so when you compare it then to another family who didn't have that wealth passed down, and we're trying to maybe create that wealth now, well, what does that look like differently? So yes, I think there are myths about the independence and the ruggedness, the bootstraps. Those are great ideas, but if we really stop to look at how your history, your family history, where you lived, who you are, what neighborhood you lived in, how you grew up, all those things did play into your development of who you are as an adult, who you are as a person. And not everybody had the same opportunities. And sometimes, yeah, it might be fearful to think, oh, this person might take something away. But we're really talking about, I often think about education. We talk a lot about early childhood education being very important. If we're setting up the youngest children for success, successful children typically turn into successful adults. And so if we're thinking about this long term, when somebody is an adult, we're not, as a society, we pay taxes for multiple things. That's, if you look at it that way, in the future, we could be paying less taxes because we invested early on. We're thinking about how equity plays out with young children. We're thinking about how equity plays out in our prison systems. How do we pull people over, and why do we do those things? So really thinking about, ultimately, no one does anything on their own. No one is truly independent. There is a community, there is a history there.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so I think that's another thing I have to look at historically. And who was the police department, sheriff's department set up for? Why were posses originally created? And then I remember somebody at the Minneapolis Police Department saying that they found an old job description from like 1963 that said on there, white male, to become a police officer. So, 1963. If we do the math, that's not that many years ago. That's most definitely my mother's generation, not mine. And so if you really think about, 52 years, it was set up in a certain way to protect certain people. And truthfully, that's how it was originally set up. And then throughout the years, as we started to talk about equal rights, and we had the Civil Rights Act of '64, things started to change, as in, bringing in police officers of color or women police officers. Those things started to change, but still our own biases, our own perception on who a criminal could be or who a criminal is, all of those pieces still play a role and is passed down, and culture becomes normalized, all culture. And so if you think about policing culture, some things become normalized there. And so if we're looking at it now in 2015, I think the other big thing that has sparked even more conversation is our connection to social media and to having the news at our fingertips 24/7. We have breaking news all the time, anytime. And so the combination of still having our own biases and prejudice when we're working and policing, and just this connection to social media, and when something goes down, everybody knows it very quickly. It becomes viral. I think has really sparked this, and it's kind of that boiling pot's been boiling for a while, but now it's overflowing. And so now folks are finally saying, look, we just had enough. We need to protect our children. We need to have these conversations. We need to rethink about our justice system and what does that mean, and really be real with these conversations, because we might have been able to bring in police of color, women, and really mix that up, but we really haven't had a real conversation about what does it really mean? How does biases really play into the way we police? And I know I'm a parent of 2 young men of color. I taught them very young on how to be safe around police officers. These are just realities that we want to go beyond. We want to teach our kids to be safe, but that conversation about how to be safe around police officers is not a conversation that every parent has with their child, and mostly those are white parents. So when we start to talk about Black Lives Matter, it's because there's this real feeling that those lives don't matter, that we see the amount of those children being shot, young men, young women, or being policed differently, being arrested at higher rates. We know the statistics. So now it's about, we need to talk about it so we can start changing some of these policies and the procedures. It's not just one thing to change the policies. We have to change our procedures as well. Yeah. Right, absolutely. And I think that's one thing with, if we think about Black Lives Matters, I know it's a hashtag, and I know some folks may roll their eyes at that, but I tell folks all the time, you only need to talk, 5 people talk to their policymaker, and that policymaker will start to listen. Policymakers have the best intentions, but they have, I mean, there's if we're just talking about the state of Minnesota, 8,000 bills goes into the hopper each year. So that's a lot of things for policymakers to make decisions on. So it does rely on us, the public, to go up to the Capitol and say, hey, this is why Black Lives Matters. This is how I've been affected by my police department. Here are the policies and procedures I know about that affects our family. And at the same time, we need to be working with police officers and sergeants and police departments and saying, hey, this is what we're seeing, this is what we're feeling. Let's go up to the Capitol and have these conversations together, because yes, often there are many laws that are put in place that, not always in the best interest, sometimes of police officers, and sometimes not in the best interest of the public, especially when we start navigating, into communities of color, LGBT community, other oppressed communities, underserved communities. And so we need to be actively sharing those voices. We need to be upfront and outright with, this is how it affects me, and being able to talk about it at many levels. And I'm using the state capitol, but there's federal guidelines that folks have to follow. There's local stuff at our city. We can make changes, but we need to do it collectively together. But we have to be open to have that dialogue first. And that's where I'm hoping, this hashtag, Black Lives Matters, is more than a hashtag, but that I'm seeing that as opening dialogue, is having people think about it and start with that awareness. What does that mean? And so we can move to a place of knowledge building and skill building, and eventually all of that will turn into action. And then we can really think about, how are these actions then equitable for everybody in our community as lawmakers are making laws at the state level? How are we thinking about this in an equitable framework? So the city of Minneapolis and the city of St. Paul Police Department, they might need something different than Moorhead, Minnesota, or Hutchinson, Minnesota. I'm not even sure where that is. But, each area needs something. So when we talk about equity again, each area needs something different. And all those areas serves low income, communities of color, LGBT. They're in every neighborhood. So how are we making those laws? How are we policing? And how are we as a community holding all of those areas accountable? We talk about all the time. I do it as a person, thinking about other groups that I think I'm an ally to, but no one from that community has called me an ally. So how can I really be an ally? So on that personal level, but then also just on this work around racial justice as well. And I think that's very key. I could say, me personally, I do a lot of work around ability and disability. And I have a son that is on the autism spectrum. So I've done a lot of work, but never has my son ever said, thanks, Mom, for being an advocate and being an ally. And that could be for many different reasons, because he's my son. But I think that is a very key thing, is when somebody from that community is saying, wow, you see it, you're understanding it, you're asking questions, you're examining and re-examining your thoughts, your beliefs, your biases around these topics, and you're taking time to stop and really listen without assuming you know what the community needs. And so when somebody from that community can say, hey, you're doing all of those things, and here are some more things that you can think about, I think that is a key when folks can truly say, yeah, this community identified me as an ally, and I wear that proud, but with the understanding that I have to continually examine what that means and my role, and being open to listen to that community. So I think ally is a great thing. Allies are needed. But yes, I personally don't think that you can just wear that crown. You can go out, buy the crown, and wear it yourself. It needs to be given to you from that community. So it's, when I often think about the hipster racism, I always giggle when I hear that. But I really, like for me, where I see it really pulling out, not so much in the communities and circles that I travel in, but I really see it, I think, on television. And this is coming from somebody who doesn't watch a lot of television and only then streams it after the fact. But, you know, if we're looking at some of our, you know, we have some shows that are out now that really uses Two Broke Girls is one that I've seen a few episodes of. I don't know if I can call them out.
No.
But it's really playing into some of these really heavy stereotypes where they're relying on the comedic factor to be an Asian man with a very heavy accent that plays into a lot of these stereotypes, or what it...
Like the show Fresh Off the Boat?
Yes.
The, you know, Blackish, Devious Maids. I mean, these are all in that same
Empire.
line. Empire,
Yeah.
which I haven't seen, but...
Yeah, and it plays into the very heavy stereotypes, and where I often find it to be very dangerous is that this is primetime television. So once we're watching it, once we, you know, go week after week to watch these episodes of these shows, it becomes normal. It becomes normalized in the way we talk, the way we think, especially if we're not challenging what we're seeing on primetime television. And so when we normalize those things, it becomes just a comedic factor. Like, oh yeah, that's funny. And we can, you know, joke around about, you know, turn around and say a joke and, oh, well, you know, that's what so-and-so said on Blackish, so it's okay. Well, you know, the question is really, is it okay? How are we talking, you know, how are we perpetuating white supremacy in the television shows or in a lot of these comedic relief sitcoms? And so it's just it's one that, you know, I don't have any great answers to it, but I often, when I talk about these shows, I have a very guilty pleasure of watching Scandal and Empire. And so, but I'm often going through each one and really examining, where are those heavy stereotypes? Where are things that I just brushed off as normal? How am I talking about it then with my own children, with my partner, with my friends and family? Where will I draw the line? And where will I say, you know what I'm seeing here is just not okay? And then what are my actions, steps there? Am I writing a letter to the network? Am I talking to other folks? Like, what are those action steps when I'm at the point to say, hey, this is not okay and enough's enough?
And so it's important to have those action steps ready.
Yeah,
right?
and I think often, because things that are said, things that we say, things that we normalize, we just leave it as such and we kind of move on. But talking about it is great, but what else is there? There are so many other moving parts. Anywhere from, we know what boycotting can change.
Mm-hmm.
Is it boycotting? Is it having conversations? Is it, storming Sony videos and saying, hey, you can't produce this? Is it making sure that you're not watching the Oscars? I mean, there are many different things that we could be doing, but that's a self-reflection on the person, who they are, and really where they're at in that journey as well, and how much energy they're willing to put out there to make real change.
So it's important to do.
Do, yeah, not just say.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.